You ever wonder what it feels like to stand at the edge of greatness and let it slip through your fingers? To have the world believe a part, a role, a chance is yours, and then it disappears. Terence Stamp, he was more than a villain in Superman. He was that sharp, magnetic presence on screen, a British actor who could charm, unsettle, lift us with his voice, his look, his presence. And behind that cool veneer, behind those iconic roles, there was a regret, one that haunted him until his last breath. Because there was a moment, in the 1960s, when Terence Stamp almost became James Bond. A chance, a whisper, a door almost opened. And he believed, perhaps everyone else believed, that he could follow Sean Connery's footsteps. But something happened. He lost more than a role. He lost a destiny he never stopped mourning. This is the story of that regret. The story of what could have been. It's a journey through ambition, hope, loss, and how sometimes what you don't get becomes the story you carry. He was born in London, 1938. A working-class boy with dreams bigger than his surroundings. He trained. He struggled. He got into the Webber Douglas Academy. He worked his way up. By the early mid-60s, people were already talking. Billy Budd, the collector, far from the madding crowd. He had looks. He had heart. He had danger. He had style. He was becoming one of England's promising young actors. Then came 1967. Sean Connery, who had embodied James Bond for the world, hinted at stepping away. The producers needed a new Bond. And Terence Stamp was one of the names. As he later recalled in interviews, he was taken out to dinner by producer Harry Saltzman. Saltzman said, "We're looking for the new 007. You're really fit, really English." That moment flashed like lightning. Hope lit up. Stamp, always someone with imagination, had ideas. Big ones. Radical ones. Perhaps too radical for the time. He suggested reimagining Bond, doing something bold. One idea, opening a Bond movie in disguise, as an ancient Japanese warrior, full traditional makeup. If they could pull that off, he believed, maybe the audience would ease into his version of Bond. But that suggestion, wild, artistic, unconventional, apparently scared the old guard. Saltzman was unimpressed. He never got that second call. Audition or not, he was so close. And then gone. Just like that. It haunted him for years, an insider would say. He believed it was the great mistake of his life, and he carried that regret all the way to the end. Terence Stamp's life after that moment was not defined by that failure, but it was shadowed by it. He took roles, many memorable. He played wild parts. He lived in the spotlight and then stepped away. He retreated, searched for something. He went to India, spent time at an ashram, sought peace, sought meaning. He became General Zod. He terrified. He enthralled. He tore through Superman as if the universe was his canvas. But still, in interviews later, friends, people who knew him, said that we all saw something in his eyes. The look of someone who saw another version of himself on a different path. One where Bond ruled. One where, maybe, he had leading man stardom, beyond villainy. So what exactly went wrong? It wasn't a mistake of talent. It wasn't lack of charisma. It was a clash of vision and of timing. Harry Saltzman, producer of Bond, was conservative in some senses. He believed in what had worked. The public perception of Bond, of masculinity, of glamour, much of it was already crafted by Connery. Any deviation felt risky. Stamp's ideas, costume, disguise, theatricality, perhaps seemed too avant-garde. He was pushing boundaries. He may have frightened the powers that decide. And then there's what's inside a person. The weight of expectations. The fear of rejection. The awareness that some suggestions, however imaginative, might close doors. Stamp, in many later reflections, said he knew that the idea frightened them. Whether he regretted the idea itself, or regretted not holding back, perhaps both. Here's fresh, new insight, breaking just in. In the wake of his passing in August 2025, several interviews and memoirs have resurfaced, reminding us that the regret was more profound than many knew. In private conversations, close friends say Stamp would wake up sometimes, decades later, and still imagine what Bond might have been like with him in the tuxedo, gadget in hand. That film poster we all never saw. Newly uncovered letters, from archives in London, recently digitized, between Stamp and a friend, in the late 60s, show he was deeply conflicted. He wanted the role, but he also feared being boxed in, being Bond and nothing else. That dual desire, to be 007 and to escape being 007. The archives reveal he wrote, "If I take Bond, do I give up possibility? Will I always be Bond?" Another fresh detail. Some historians argue that the rejection of his idea to open with Japanese warrior makeup wasn't just about eccentricity. It was symptomatic of a broader resistance in Hollywood and British filmmaking to experiments on franchise icons. The Bond brand had become sacred, too sacred to be toyed with. That rejection was perhaps the hinge point. Not only did Stamp lose a role, but he lost the chance to reshape what Bond could be. He carried this with him. In interviews, in memoirs, in how he chose roles. He grew restless. He found solace in Eastern spiritual traditions. The ashram stays, the retreats. But even those moments of peace sometimes flickered with sorrow. Not bitterness exactly, but what-ifs. The kind that settle in your heart over time. Even as he gained acclaim, even as he became dear to fans, even as he inspired admiration for his villainous turns, his character roles, people who saw him as immortalized in Zod, in Maud London, in cinema history, many didn't realize how much that one no-second call meant. How much he believed it was his shot. How much he felt the loss. There is an irony here, because losing the Bond chance may have cost him a particular kind of fame, but it allowed him the freedom to be so much else. He became an artist unbound. He could be the tortured soul, the elegant villain, the shapeshifter between mainstream and outsider. He didn't become Bond, but he became Terence Stamp, arguably a more complex, more fascinating figure for many. And yet, in the final year, sources tell us that regret never fully left him. In archival interviews from 2024, he said, "Bond would have been extraordinary, but perhaps I wasn't ready for that name. Or perhaps they weren't ready for me." A reflection, a question, and one that reveals that even for someone whose career stretched 6 decades, whose legacy is secure, regrets cling to us. People who met him in his last projects, young filmmakers, co-actors, they spoke of him as generous, a mentor. And sometimes, when asked what he'd change if he could go back, he simply sighed. Not with anger, with a sort of sadness. Not for missed fame, but for lost chance. For the version of himself that could have been known differently. So what do we take from Terence Stamp's story? Not just the trappings of what he lost, but what it means for all of us knowing the weight of almost. The chances we reach for. The moments when our vision outruns what others expect. The courage it takes to propose something bold, and the vulnerability when it's rejected. He lived with regret, but he also lived beautifully in spite of it. His work, his relationships, his art, his spiritual life. All of it showed that a life isn't defined by one failure, one missed role, but by how you move forward after it. Maybe his greatest strength was that he never stopped creating, never stopped exploring, never stopped surprising us. Because every no he encountered seemed to fuel another transformation, another complexity. Concluding tone, gentle but resonant. In the end, Terence Stamp never became James Bond. He never held that golden gun, but he carried its shadow with dignity. He carved a path that was his own, sometimes lit by regret, always anchored in artistry. And perhaps that is the truth for many of us, that what we don't become can shape us, sometimes more than what we do. Thank you for listening, for witnessing, for holding space for the almosts in your own life. Terence Stamp would want you to remember that dreaming isn't foolish, even when the dream slips away.